cartoon.
Another day, another cartoonist gets jettisoned. It's become it's a conflagration, I tell you, a conflagration. For those of you who don't know, I'm an editorial cartoonist. I'm Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
And I'm Ted Rall, editorial cartoonist, coming to you from the left.
And we are happily joined by Association of American Editorial Cartoonists, Jack Ohman of the San Francisco Chronicle.
You forgot his title, President.
I said president.
Oh, did you?
President, yeah.
For life, actually. That was determined last night at a bar.
Nice.
Oh, that's great. Awesome. Congratulations. What are you going to invade first?
Well, we need some F-18s and then we'll talk.
You should invade the editorial writers. We can take them
easily.
Oh my God.
What do you want to talk about in American editorial cartooning? I have lots about this recently, having been fired.
Yeah. For those of you who may not know, Jack Ohman was with the Sacramento Bee for how many years, Jack?
10.
For 10 years, and was unceremoniously jettisoned. I've been there myself, and it sucks. But you've landed on you're still going to have a voice. You still have a paper. You still have a base with the San Francisco Chronicle. So that's great. But a few weeks before that, 3 cartoonists were like, trying to remember.
Let me just walk you through it so you don't have to remember it. Okay. I mean,
thank you.
You're welcome. So on July 11th, Kevin Sayers, Joel Pett, and I were fired by McClatchy for, quote, no cause. And McClatchy had decided that they were no longer going to run editorial cartoons in any of their newspapers. Now, I will tell you that I led the newsroom in page views with my columns and cartoons. So it's not about money, okay? And Kevin Sayers, and I was a manager, an editor. I was deputy California opinion editor. That was my title in HR, okay? And so, and Joel was on contract with McClatchy. Now, all 3 of us had won Pulitzer Prizes for McClatchy. I think Joel must have been with Knight Ridder in 2000. That was before McClatchy took over Knight Ridder. And then Jim Moran won the Pulitzer for McClatchy in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And he retired. And then the same day that I was fired, Steve Breen at the San Diego Union Tribune was offered a buyout from Alden Global Capital, and he took it. And so now California has, I'm on very happily on contract with the San Francisco Chronicle, listed as, I would say, a contributing columnist. So I'm not just doing cartoons for these folks, and I'm very grateful to be there. And then Mike Thompson was
after 6 months.
How to describe it? They ended the position at the Minneapolis Star Tribune. And Steve Sack, who had won a Pulitzer, I think in the mid 2000s sometime, and is revered within this profession. I mean, every cartoonist loves Steve Sack, and he's great. He's the guy who can do the sculptures and the mobiles and the paintings and the cartoons, and he does it with it, dancing in heels with his eyes closed on an iPad. He's broadly talented, and he was revered there. In fact, his book of cartoons won the Minnesota Book Award when he left. And so everybody was elated that Minneapolis was going to hire another cartoonist. And so they hired Mike Thompson, who had recently gotten, let go by Gannett. And he was first at the Detroit Free Press, and then he went to USA Today. And so that's 5 positions down in about 3 months. And we didn't have a lot to begin with. Now, California no longer has full-time editorial cartoonists. I'm on contract. Breen's position, where he lands is TBD. He's working hard. I understand he's going to become an art teacher for the moment. And he's a very broadly talented, not just a cartoonist, but an artist. Mark Fiore is no longer affiliated with anybody. He won the Pulitzer
as an animator.
In 14, I think, somewhere in there. And
something happened in LA. I don't remember.
And then this guy, and he was on contract with the LA Times and so on.
And also Dave Horsey, also at the LA Times.
And
was laid off, was fired unceremoniously.
so, you know, and I'm sure, I mean, I'm forgetting others. You know, there are a lot of people who lost their jobs, let's just say over the last 15 years, but more in the last 7 years, where as president of this group, I don't think I can point to 20 full-time positions now in the United States.
I count 12 when I count.
Did you? Okay, well, you know, somebody was saying the other day that Matt Davis is the only one in the top 10 newspaper markets now, full-time. Okay.
Is he on staff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I thought Bromhall was on staff at the Daily News as well.
I don't think so. I think that's a contract position.
I'm not aware of that. And I asked somebody that, and he's been there, and he's a terrific cartoonist, incidentally. He doesn't get enough attention either. But you know, some of it to me is money. All the newspapers are contracting, but when you're in an environment where Gannett, for example, has eliminated opinion, not just cartoonists, opinion. They have 236 newspapers, and they found that in the smaller markets, that they were just getting in red markets, they were just getting so much blowback on any Trump criticism that they just kind of threw up their hands. And you know, there's a guy named William Allen White from Emporia, Kansas, back in, you know, the 30s, who was a revered, you know, commentator. And you know, that was right in the middle of Alf Landon's. Since we're talking about Calvin Coolidge and Alf Landon and people like that, people didn't seem to be as afraid of opinion back then, you know. And newspapers at that time were established as, you know, and Ted, I think, will agree with me, they're as a political microphone. You know, New York had like 7 daily newspapers, and you had PM, which was socialist, and you had the New York Times, which, you know, was kind of lightly progressive Democratic, and then you had the Internet, or the New York Herald Tribune, which was kind of crunchy crumb Republican.
There was the old New York Post, the pre-Murdoch Post, which was a liberal paper. Yeah.
And so they all kind of they all came out of any ideology. In fact, one of my relatives was Charles A. Dana, who was the head of the New York Sun back in the day, and his hobby was being a vicious anti-Semitic bastard against Joseph Pulitzer. And I can assure you that he would not have been down with his whatever relative third cousin winning the Pulitzer Prize. You know, so it was a really tough environment back then, you know. And
yeah,
so,
but to just jump in real quick about the political budding of with your community, I always look to the Chicago Tribune, which was, you know, anti-New Deal, anti-Roosevelt, in a city that gave Roosevelt no less than 64% of the vote. It was anti-union, where a majority of the citizens of Chicago, especially at the time, were union members. It was very pro-Republican, very anti-intervention, and all of those things. And it was one of the biggest papers in America.
yeah, but also they had, you know, the Chicago Sun, which later became the Sun Times, and there were other newspapers in Chicago that.
Yeah, but I'm saying Chicago Tribune was always the paper of Chicago, in spite of or because of its own politics, which seemed to run contrary to its readership and the city in which it functioned. I'm just saying that it's bullshit to say, oh, we're getting angry letters from MAGA people here in, you know, Alabama for the Gannett paper. That's not.
Listen, buddy boy, I worked for the Chicago Tribune for decades and their syndication, and I can tell you that they were not exactly Colonel McCormick's paper in 1988 either. You know, they were kind of the suburban moderate Republican, you know, Bush, Reagan kind of acceptable-ish, you know, conservatism. And, you know, obviously everything's fragmented into, you know, space, but, you know, all these papers had adapted for their markets, you know, and sure, there's rather, you know, well, Chicago is very liberal, but you go about 20 miles outside of Chicago, baby, and it's a bunch of cornfield Republicans, you know, who are not digging the scene in downtown in the Loop, you know. And so in each market, each state, like the Oregonian, where I worked, was it was a Republican newspaper. We didn't endorse a Democrat until 1992. and you're this very liberal city in the middle of a very red state. And same thing in California. Sacramento is in the middle of, is a very liberal city. San Francisco is a liberal city. Los Angeles is a liberal city. San Diego is a liberal city. And then there's the rest of the state. And man, you see the pickup trucks with the flags and the whole bit out there. And so all of a sudden, major newspaper groups became afraid of blowback. The Sacramento Bee is a historical New Deal newspaper.
Well, what about the clicks? My impression, when I was a syndicate executive at United Feature Syndicate, one of the things that we sussed out pretty early, I was there from 06 to 09, was that opinion, strident opinion, was popular online. And that's certainly, if you look at like the really successful newspapers that have made the transition to the internet, those are the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, right? And they all have vibrant opinion sections. Their opinion sections are listed high in the app and in the scroll down menu. And obviously their internal dynamics, analytics obviously are showing them that people go there. They're getting the clicks. Why is that? Am I wrong there? And if I'm right, why would blowback matter? It's just about money, right?
Jack just mentioned, and I don't doubt it for a second, that he led the way in terms of audience for the online product. Mike Thompson, when he was at USA Today, built the galleries, and his own galleries were by far and away, seriously, and you guys know this to be true, by a factor of 10. His product, his work was the most popular feature of that publication. And that's true of most papers that have a staff cartoonist. And I can tell you a very quick story. Believe it or not, the Birmingham News and Newhouse newspapers decided to try some actual analytics. I know it's weird, given that it was a multi-billion-dollar business that had no self-analytics. Its self-analytics were like, I'm the editor, I get to do what I want. And then one section of this focus group, they focused on the editorial page. And I said, what do you read? And they said, we don't read the editorials every day. We love the cartoons. We get that. Okay. But what, so you read the editorial page every day? We do. What do you like about it? We read the cartoon. What about the editorials? We don't read those. They went round and round on this to I'm telling you, the next time they had a group, and I'm not kidding, they blacked out my cartoon. because they didn't want to know. They wanted to be affirmed as to what they want. Here's my take, Jack. Editors have hated and resented us for a long time. I can't speak for your experiences at newspapers, but I can speak to mine, where the editorial staff and the editorial page editor actually, in a good-natured way, sometimes not so much, really resented the attention we got and the power we had with our art. This is think about it. Newspapers used to be wrapped in comic strips. Remember that? Oh, look, we have Peanuts. We have
they saved newspapers at the turn of the 20th century.
There you go. And so I think that editors can write, they were reporters. They know. I have never known an editor, with the exception of yourself, who could draw a cartoon on a regular basis. Have you ever challenged?
I drifted into editing to try to grow some protective camouflage for the last couple of years of my career. Which
do you think that helped?
Well, clearly not. It might have delayed it. I succeeded a guy named Rex Babin, who was all a friend of ours, who was very popular in Sacramento. And back then, we weren't doing online, wasn't a thing. It was all and I was very popular in Sacramento, I can assure you. And the first text I got when I got fired was from Governor Newsom, not kidding. And the Browns were very upset. I had a real high profile there, and not to blow my own horn, but I did a good job there, and I provided a lot of content really fast on multiple platforms, writing and so on. And it's like, and I'm speaking speculatively here, was my salary, which I'm sure I was making more for them than they were giving to me? Is that really the reason I got fired.
Well, if that was the case, wouldn't they have just brought in someone young and cheaper?
I can't honestly, I'm in litigation, so I can't speak to the specifics of this case per se.
Right.
You're welcome to speculate all you want, but I don't know that I was losing money for them.
I know, but that's my point, is that there has been this seething subterranean resentment towards us and our profession. I really do think that part of what's happened to editorial cartooning in this country, particularly, is part and parcel of that seething.
It's not a rational business, cold-blooded business decision, is what you're saying.
No, I mean,
It's
like
not the guy
I said,
with the advisor.
I got along great with my editors. I got along great with my editors on July 10th, and quite frankly, they were all the people on our editorial board in McClatchy wrote a letter to the vice president for news at McClatchy protesting this in very, very unvarnished language. And so I had the support of my editors, but at the end of the day, it came down to corporate. And so that's all I can say, and I can't speak to their motivations. And I think that this is a rather common occurrence in a lot of these things. And you speak about whether editors like or dislike cartoonists. I won't say who the editor was, but he was at a major Midwestern newspaper, and he was up for a job at a newspaper that I was working at, and he got rid of one of our colleagues. And I said, well, why did you get rid of X? And he said, well, it was between him and an editorial writer. And I said, well, who do you think gets more attention, the editorial writer or the cartoonist?
And his answer was
cartoonist. He didn't have an answer, because he's a editorial writer. He's going to protect the editorial writer. We're not of them. I think, to your point, they see us as polymaths, basically. We do what they do, but in haiku form. It's easier for readers to grok what we do and be more entertained. Listen, I love writing editorials. I love writing columns, and it's a very important form as well. But we're unique in journalism. I mean, do you know anybody who can do what we do? I mean, there's really only about 50 people, who really do it well in the country. Maybe more, maybe less. I don't know what the figure is. It's all taste. But we're really, unicorns.
Well, let me ask you this, and I know it's a tough question to ask, especially as president of the AAC. I mean, I've been in that position myself, as Ted has been as well, but it's a hard question to ask. Is this the end of editorial cartooning as we know it? And
I feel fine.
What's that?
And I feel fine.
I don't. I mean, it kills me. I hate it. But I just get the sense that this is the end for at least for a while. It's such a great art form that I suspect that 20 years from now, some kid's going to be going through the archives at Ohio State or Loyola or whatever. They're going to see what's happening here, or see the work, and they go, "Holy shit, that's amazing!" And start doing it.
I think we're like vinyl. You
think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've always been like vinyl. We're like they never have 5 cartoonists on staff, but they have 5 or 10 columnists on staff.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? And so now it's like vinyl is 2% of the market, and the people who are into vinyl are into vinyl. And so what do I think the future is? It's not looking really good right now, is it? Now, having said that, there's still lots of papers that run cartoons, including the San Francisco Chronicle, and I was hired very enthusiastically, I can assure you. And there are other ways to talk to audiences in news, online websites. And there may come a time when more and more major websites will say, you know what, I would love to have Matt Bors on staff doing this kind of work, or I would love to have Jen Sorensen on, board doing this kind of work, because, all media is siloed, right? And it makes sense to have somebody, to speak to your audience specifically in their language. And, I was hired immediately by Michael Smerconish on CNN, who's a huge fan of editorial cartoons and highly supportive of editorial cartoons. And he picked up Breen immediately and a couple other people immediately. And so there are people out there and these types of websites, and he runs our stuff on CNN as well and talks about us on CNN and on Sirius. So like it takes people with some courage like Michael Smerconish, you know, and other people in the San Francisco Chronicle are saying, you know, damn it, this is important. And people like this stuff and it gets reaction.
Well,
So I can tell you that it's looking good. It's not looking good.
No, I'm teaching a course at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, a cartoon course on an overview of all the disciplines, and asking these 20-somethings, and they're between the ages of 19 and 21. Not one of them really knew what editorial cartooning was. We had a section, Matt Davis was kind enough to zoom in, and I had Marshall Ramsey actually in the classroom at the time. So they know now, and they like it. But it stuns me to see people that age who have never even been exposed to editorial cartooning, because I agree with you. I couldn't agree more, Jack, that
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, one of the last cartoons I looked at from Garrett's and Beekman Trudeau, the Pulitzer Prize winning quote editorial cartoonist unquote, he was literally crapping on editorial cartooning, having won the Pulitzer Prize for editorial cartooning. And you would think that like a guy like that, who's made millions of dollars and is married to Jane Pauley and has all the, you know, access that any cartoonist probably has ever had in a career, would, you know, take a little time to support what we're doing. Maybe it's not as cool as what he's doing or hip as what he's doing. But like when you have people like that crapping on us, that's not good.
Well, can I jump in on a side issue? Gary Trudeau, the days following the attacks on the cartoonists at Charlie Hebdo in Paris, came out and pretty much said, well, you know, they had it coming.
Yeah.
So he's not really a friend of,
well, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then his buddy Chuck Todd, you know, brought him on to backpedal, you know, and everybody loved Doonesbury growing up. I think the guy's, you know, a massive talent. But like when you have kind of, Lyndon Johnson used to say, I'd rather have him inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. Well, he's not pissing the right direction as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Well, okay. So going forward, I'm still holding to my scenario that some kid is going to discover this art form. Some editor is going to discover and say, yeah, we'll put that in the paper. It's hugely successful. I'd say 10.
Actuarially, I'm not looking real good, but go ahead. So.
Oh, no. We won't live to see it. Our career certainly won't. But and editors are going to do what editors do, which is that work him, me have one too, cartoon hire, here money. And, you know, in the 2030s or 2040s, that's going to happen.
The trouble with this job is that, I mean, Ted and I have been friends for 30 years. You and I have been friends for 30 years. It takes a long time to get good at this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I don't want to go back and look at my work from the Columbus Dispatch or the Minnesota Daily, but I'm very confident in what I've been doing in the last 15 or 20 years. You know, it's like, okay, I do it the way I do it. Maybe you dig it and maybe you don't. And, you know, I mean, this guy, he's a smart dude, you know, and he's been on the, you know, I remember telling Ted in 1995 in Baltimore, and maybe you remember this conversation. I said, Teddy, pretty soon, all the editors are going to be our age, and they're going to start running you and, you know, the more kind of edgier guys. It's going to be an edgier world. And what happened was
not that.
It was the opposite. And it went to, boy, you know, you look in the last a couple of years in the Washington Post cartoon page and wow, you know,
yeah,
how many elephants and donkeys can you put in for panels? You know,
it's true.
It is true.
Well, not just as the Washington Post now is running fucking gag cartoons in that slot, that her block.
Yep, that's true.
Yes, that her block used to. I mean, yeah.
No, you go back and look. Herb had, you know, the style of the day, but the Herb Block Foundation has been putting up a cartoon every day on Instagram. And I'm rather a student of Herb Block, and I knew Herb Block, and I think Ted knew Herb Block.
I knew him.
And, you know, we didn't hang around and drink with the guy, but he sure as hell knew who we were. And he would be absolutely appalled that the Washington Post, God bless him, have really marginalized Mike DeAdder and Ann, and it's now a bunch of New Yorker type cartoonists.
Yeah, well,
It's like, okay, well,
cats are funny, kittens are funny. Come on,
they are
guys.
indeed funny in the pages of the New Yorker. And I mean, there's a lot of other things I could talk about that I'm aware of at that paper and other institutions that are undermining editorial cartooning. The New York Times no longer will run editorial cartoons because some guy at the International Herald Tribune, picked a cartoon of Netanyahu that wasn't, I wouldn't have done it, but I mean, you're gonna.
Well, and that editor is still employed there. 2 cartoonists got fired who had nothing to do with that cartoon, just for people who may not be unaware of what happened there.
and it goes on and on. See, so like when I give my state of the cartooning address, which I will try not to be too suicidal tomorrow, or make have a little 10-minute talk about where I think we're at. I sure as heck didn't think I was going to get canned, honestly.
Oh no, I was flabbergasted.
Yeah, everybody was flabbergasted.
Frankly, Mike Thompson. Well, at Cyrus, I could see Joel. Both of them were doing, but you were doing so much more. Mike Thompson was doing a ton of stuff.
Listen, Kevin Sayers is a very hard-hitting cartoonist, and you look at his stuff day to day in North Carolina. He really was challenging those guys. I mean, he's a very courageous cartoonist. Joel Pett has always been a very courageous cartoonist.
Yeah, I didn't mean to dismiss them that way.
Does some really effective work. It doesn't have to do with whether they're talented or not.
No, it's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
I didn't say that. That's not what I said.
I'm just I appreciate your compliment, but these are all really talented people.
No. I don't think you understood what I was saying. What I was saying was you went out and did additional work, added values, and brought more traffic and conceivably more revenue to your newspaper than being a staff cartoonist alone. And Mike Thompson did much more than just drawing his cartoons, and not just because it used to be that was our sole job. Remember that, kids?
Yeah.
And so this isn't to disparage anybody other than it's to scratch my head some more at saying these guys actually added value.
Popularity and quality have nothing to do with these decisions, as you guys have been going. I mean, operating at, unfortunately, a lower level most of the time throughout my career, as you two guys have, having never been on staff at a daily paper. Nevertheless, I've seen the same kind of silliness. I used to edit the cartoon roundup, which included guys like you in the for the Daily Beast, and so that it was very quickly became the most widely read feature at Daily Beast.
Wow, really?
And then
amazing.
Then they moved. It was so popular that the Tina Brown, then the editor, decided to move it to Saturdays because Saturday was a low traffic day, and they thought people would follow the cartoons to Saturday. But in fact, it's kind of like the decision that brought the original Star Trek series to an end, where they moved it to a Friday night. The people didn't. Indeed, the Saturday went up, but it was less than before. So Tina said, "Oh, well, people don't like cartoons," so she got rid of the feature entirely. And I had another incident at the Charlottesville at Seaville Weekly, the Charlottesville, Virginia alt weekly. They ran both my cartoons and my columns. I was so popular there that when I went, the one time I appeared for a book signing, they had to have town hall rented out. They paid 550 people paid $20 each to come and see me. That money ended up, the paper sponsored it, so they collected the revenue. Okay, I was huge in there. The editor, who shall remain nameless except that her name is Kathy Harding, told me that
that's a weird nameless name.
Very, very strange. But this person, who was definitely not named Kathy Harding, what she said was that
and her co-editor Jane Doe.
It might have been they or a he, I don't know. Anyway, so she told me, we're canceling your cartoons and your columns. I said, why? She said, oh, because you are the only person that anyone ever talks about in the paper. All the letters are about you. All the discussion is about you online, and we can't have it be the Ted Rall Weekly. And so I said, well, if the problem is that other things aren't as popular. Why don't you get other things that are more popular instead of spiking the thing that is popular? Which, I mean, it was self-serving, but I mean, we all have stories to tell like this. I mean, and it's like, honestly, even if you take out our own self-interest as cartoonists from this equation, newspapers have been making editorial decisions about everything from photography to their editor, to the way they cover the news, to their format, that have been retrograde, cowardly, backward looking, not trying to appeal to younger readers. And it just seems like there's just this Titanic is going down and they're climbing the mast and trying to stay out of the cold water as long as possible, but they're not trying to actually save the ship.
Well, and also, I mean, it's not just editorial cartoonists. I mean, there's more than one major daily newspaper in the United States that doesn't really have a copy desk or a photo department or, so like and I don't view copy desks as nice to have, right?
Right. You have to have
have to have that. And yet, run it through, spell check and keep your fingers crossed. I can't tell you how many times, for example, I've been saved by copy editors, as recently as a couple of weeks ago by my editor at the San Francisco Chronicle. You can't spell check like knowing when the Stamp Act was, and that's why copy editors win Jeopardy every week, and there's so many things. And everything's been gutted in newspapers. It makes you wonder whether, I think this is part of the war on American democracy, which is like these, whoever they are who are running these newspapers have decided that they don't need to be that great anymore. And when you give any consumer a weaker product over time, they're not going to buy it. They're not going to buy it. And so, this is we're just part of a whole.
And on that, we should probably
if we're going to wrap things
up.
Had a
nice time last night.
True.
There were many cartoonists there who are still working and making some money, and they have really successful wives.
that's
it.
I have a successful wife with a great dental plan.
Excellent.
And he has a nice smile.
He has a great smile.
Yeah.
Probably has excellent dental plan.
He was probably, I would see you as governor of Alabama.
Oh, I can see that.
I could not. You know what? Jack and I have talked about. We've talked about running for office before, and many, many years ago, I was approached to run for the state senate, and I decided not to. It just wasn't the time. When I moved back here a few years ago, I approached some friends of mine who were high-ranking Republicans in the state and said, I'd like to run for office. And they said, how can you out-Trump the candidates you'll be running against? I won't even try. And they said, you won't have a prayer. So maybe a few more years.
Come to you and talk to you about running for something?
Spitzer wanted me to run for the House of Representatives from Suffolk County. I believe that's Lee Zeldin's old spot now.
Well, you know what? You can go back and run for your boy DeVold or whatever his name is.
De Blasio?
No, the crazy guy, George.
God.
Santos.
Yes.
Yeah,
Santos.
he lived. Yeah, his district he has a strange district. It's partly in Queens and partly in Nassau County. It goes across the city line, which is very strange.
Well, there will be a vacancy there, I can assure you. So
no, I'm not so sure.
You are tanned.
Well, thank you.
And you're rested.
And I'm ready.
And he's ready.
So yeah, no, I mean, I did think about it, and honestly, I thought like the idea of sitting in those meetings was just so boring.
And I decided that I would run for the Continental Congress.
I see that. My God, get a haircut, hippie.
Well, I'm in California now,
Dude, I'm a native Californian. I don't look like that.
I know. Well, I wouldn't try long hair if I were you, honestly, but
No, why?
Yeah. It's a big,
Why?
Big comb over, baby. But,
yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's got very.
Cartoonists have to flame each other a little.
True.
Nah, listen. I
look better with shorter hair. I get.
No, I've let my hair grow a little longer, and you're right. The Nixonian of it loks like. Do you remember LB?
Nixonian. That's very California, actually.
Yeah.
Do you remember when Johnson left the presidency in '69, and they pictures of him from the farm, and he had long hair?
Yeah,
it was so strange. That's what this would look like.
I was just down there a couple of weeks ago, with my son and Ben Sargent, the cartoonist, And wow, what a blast from the past, and it's not anywhere as big as you would think. The LBJ Ranch.
Really?
I was like, this is kind of the LBJ Martini Farm. You got a pole barn with a couple cows. The river's not as Pinellas is not anywhere near as big as you would think. I've seen houses, and
It's like going back to third grade and everything's small.
Okay, wait. Let's wrap this up. Jack, where can we see your fabulous work now?
In the San Francisco Chronicle online and in print. And then I'm syndicated by Tribune Content Agency 4 days a week, and on smirkanish.com.
Okay, Smirkanish, what is that? I'm sorry.
He's a host on CNN and Sirius.
Okay.
He's a weekend host, right?
He's a weekend host, and he's a terrific guy.
Okay.
That's where
Ted?
I am.
You can find
That's where you're at, man.
Find me at rall.com, whowhatwhy.org. You can listen to my radio show, which I co-host Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 12 noon on Radio Sputnik. You can find that on Rumble, and gocomics.com/Ted Rall.
And I'm also on jackohman.net.
Okay.
My site.
jackohman.net.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Not.com.
And you can see my stuff at gocomics.com/Scott Stantis or gocomics.com/Prickly City. See my comic strip. You can go to chicagotribune.com/opinion. I'm sorry, Jack just put on his dark glasses. You look like you're about to the Blues Brothers there.
We are. We're the late middle-aged blues brothers.
And also go to Center Clip. It's always the C words that trip me up. Center Clip, which is their like mini podcast, 30 seconds, no longer than 5 minutes. I posted a few this morning, as a matter of fact. And Ted posts like 17 or 18 a day. So try to keep up with him. Guys, and Jack, thanks for joining us. This was fun. Thank you.
It was great to get together with you guys again and to see this dude in person after a couple of years. And we're having a great time. We wish you were here.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm like I said,
Scott soon.
Yeah, I'm flying out to New York next week.
I'm going to make you president of the AAC for the next 2 years.
If you do that, I will come and I will hunt.
You better hang up really fast.
Well, give my love to everybody. For all of us here at the DMZ America podcast, we'll see you next time. Do 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 do.